A warm welcome to your midweek Barbados Today evening news update for Wednesday, March 24. Promised capital projects, particularly in the tourism sector, will get started and in some cases be completed this year. Word of this from Leader of Government Business Senator Jerome Walcott as he opened debate on the 2021 to 2022 appropriation bill in the upper chamber today. He acknowledged there has been much delay, largely because of the COVID-19 pandemic.
I start with the Lord's Castle redevelopment. It's a 450-room Wyndham Grand Hotel, and it is now being expected to be completed by the end of this year. It's being financed, of course, by a US $170 million loan from Exim Bank of China. When completed, is expected to employ 1,000 persons, and consistent with government's policy, it will be sold to the private sector because we don't believe that we should be running hotels. So far, I believe it's 308 rooms have been completed. I said 450, and it is expected to be completed by the end of this year. The Hyatt Ziva, a number of these projects, of course, with COVID have been put on hold because the investors have been reviewing the macroeconomic situation, persons not traveling. Hyatt Ziva, it's a 370-room hotel, 26 residences, and it will have 2 towers. All planning permissions have been received except for over-the-water villas. And as I said, the flyer is reviewing the process and looking at it, the impact of the macro environment, and the project is expected to start this year. Massey Pierhead, the 7 acres of land owned by at the Pierhead is being inquired by an investor who plans on building a 250-bed hotel with additional condos and retail space on Bay Street. The investor is not interested in a high-rise or dense development, but in a beautifully family-type hotel with adequate green and blue space. And again, this is not expected to commence this year, with an estimated budget of US $120 million. A Bridge House, the Pierhead, and this was planned to be a hotel, but I gather that the investor wants to do something to support the 2 or 3 hotels in Bridgetown and the cruise ship passengers with some sort of entertainment and retail space. And the upper floors will likely be condos. This is also timed to start this year. Carlisle House, I think all of you are familiar with that at the car park down there. Obviously, the investor here is a Jamaican investor, and they're working with JADA. They're reviewing the business model, but one of the requests is to secure more land to make the project scalable, and of course, parking is also an issue. They were planning to come here last month, but because of the shutdown, they have put off that for the time being. And Blue Horizon is waiting town and country planning approval.
Opposition Senator Crystal Drake said they warned that the government runs the risk of falling into a debt trap, while acknowledging that government expenditure must rise as a result of fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic. She says the Mayor Motley administration must be extra vigilant.
This year, the government is expected to run a fiscal deficit of $782 million. And based on the estimates of revenue and expenditure for 2021-2022, it is seeking to get that financing from external sources, $447 million, and non-project based, which is not commercial, $250 million. On the domestic side, government is seeking to finance this deficit by seeking to raise $334 million, of which $292 million will be sourced from financing, which is not debentures, bonds, treasury bills, the usual financial instruments we know that government seeks to implement when they're trying to raise capital. Sir, I have not heard from the government, both on the external side and the domestic side, where this financing is possibly or likely to come from, and also what is the possible cost of this financing. So sir, because the size of the debt that we are incurring is one thing, but the profile is also equally important, because the level of interest that we will possibly be paying for this debt, along with the repayment period, is also equally important. And I think once we are finding ourselves in a position where we're running these types of deficits, it would be prudent that the government also articulates where it intends to get this financing from.
Meanwhile, Independent Senator Lyndon Nurse advised the government to be efficient in its affairs. He too stressed that spending must be managed and suggested that procurement is a major area for improvement.
Well, we have the Rule 239 in the financial rules, which basically allows government, cabinet, to approve certain expenditures without necessarily going through the whole process of tendering and so on. And while that has and that becomes necessary at certain times, I want to suggest, Mr. President, that government should try to desist from invoking or using this rule. It has to be part of our transparency, part of making ourselves more efficient, part of making ourselves more fair, has to be a greater use of a tendering process. And therefore, wherever possible, it would be my suggestion to government that this Rule 239, I think it is, be used sparingly.
More than 4,000 households have benefited from government's Adopt Our Families program, and Minister in the Ministry of Finance, Ryan Strawn, signals it will continue. He gave the assurance today after receiving 2 donations. The British High Commission donated £60,000 to the program, while the Barbados Hotel and Tourism Association gave $20,000. Minister Strawn disclosed that government has put in over $20 million and has received just under $10 million from donors. He assured government would continue to provide relief for vulnerable families.
There's regional and international news after this short break.
To regional happenings in Jamaica, small hotels and some businesses are bracing for fallout, but they're backing the government's decision to enforce weekend lockdowns in the face of rising COVID-19 cases. More in this report from Television Jamaica.
Many enterprises were depending on the Easter holidays to do good business, but those hopes were shattered when Prime Minister Andrew Holness announced 3 weekends of a nationwide lockdown. Hotels have since been met with cancellations and some small businesses forced to stay closed. However, President of the Montego Bay Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Janet Silvera, says the business community is in agreement with what the government is trying to do.
We know that a number of our members are going to lose business, are going to lose money as a result. But sometimes you have to make the sacrifices. Government could have done a full lockdown, but they didn't. The 3 weekends, we know people are going to lose. However, we know also that it is for the good at the end of the tunnel.
She recognized that with some unruly persons continuing to disregard the COVID-19 protocols, drastic measures were needed.
I don't believe that we have enough police to enforce the law right now. And there are parties that are being held in the bushes. There are parties that are being staged at midnight. There are people who are leaving villas and going to these events. We know about a lot of things that's happening. And it is because of selfishness and this disrespect to the law.
She also pointed to the possible long-term negative effects it might have on tourism if action is not taken.
On the international scene, Interpol warns that criminals are selling fake COVID-19 vaccines and treatments online in scams that can put people's health, security, and bank balances at risk. The international crime agency is advising people to be vigilant about such scams and not to buy any coronavirus vaccine online.
This came, they say, after receiving reports that some networks in China and South Africa of criminal networks had been disrupted, but also that some COVID-19 vaccines were available on the dark corners of the internet and could be bought using cryptocurrency like Bitcoin. Now, the Secretary General of Interpol, Jürgen Stock, wanted many people to point out the serious issues with this. Firstly, the fact that these COVID-19 vaccines online have not necessarily been approved or regulated like they would do during a government rollout program, and therefore they might not even work or could contain serious side effects that are unknown. But also there's a warning that people who are trying to buy these vaccines online could be giving their details or even money to these international criminal networks. Well, for more on this, we can now speak to Oded Vanunu, who's the head of product research at Checkpoint. They're a cyber security firm. Thank you very much for speaking to us. We really appreciate your time. Can you just tell us how widespread the scale is of this international criminal network trying to profit from the pandemic?
So this is a large-scale effort by the cybercrime. Since December that we started to investigate it, we saw a large increased number, around 100% of the supply level in the darknet. And the supply level started with the Chinese and the Russian vaccine, and in November, once Pfizer and Moderna was approved by the FDA, we saw a boom of 100% of offering the entire vaccination vendors, also now AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson. And this is like increasing every week, and we are alerting to the authorities that there is a problem, that the darknet is using the gap between the supply and the demand in the world exactly to perform some kind of scam or to gain profit from this situation.
That's news, but for the very latest, visit our website at www.barbadostoday.bb. You can also subscribe to our e-paper, email updates, or like us on Facebook, and sign up for our breaking news alerts via WhatsApp. We're also on Izumi Media and bus terminals, as well as screenplay at supermarkets and gas stations near you. You can also hear us on Mix 96.9 FM and Capital Media HD 99.3 FM.